Today, I am going to be ranking every single manager that has taken part in the Championship 21-22 season. We're including managers that have been sacked, of course, but they've got to play at least 5 games in charge. You know, we're not allowing interim managers that have been one-offs or whatever. They've got to play or manage at least 5 games in charge, basically. That's how we're going to qualify it as a proper manager. So, there are 33 managers to rank, so I'm not going to waste too much time with the intro. We're going to go straight into it. If you guys like Wizzy, please give the video a like. And just to help the channel, please do hit the subscribe button as we're trying to grow this channel. And please share this channel to as many people as you can. All of that helps too. But without any further ado, let's start ranking every single Championship manager from worst to best. So today we're going to start off with Chris Hughton of Nottingham Forest, who has literally just been bad. So the tiers, manager of the season, terrific, good, poor and just bad. And that is exactly what Chris Hughton finds himself, because he got Nottingham Forest bottom of the table 7 games into the season. And we've seen what Steve Cooper has done, and he's going to be in manager of the season. Just for the fact that when he came in September, the amount of points per game he managed to get, that if he actually started at the start of the season, he would have overtaken Fulham. It's unbelievable the turnaround that Steve Cooper has done. And I know I've moved on from Hughton quite briskly there, but with the squad he had, you were able to see just they were really held back by Chris Hughton's inability to get the best out of them. Tactically, they didn't really look like they had any game plan. You know, their football was not great on the eye to watch. They weren't scoring enough goals either. The real contrast of 2 managers to start things off. We're now going to go with another big contrast as we're going to omit McCarthy. Well, I'm going to have to put him just bad as well. And I'm really surprised with this one. In terms of the managers that have surprised me the most, I mean, Hughton's right up there because obviously, you know, we saw what he did with Nottingham Forest last year, stayed the ship and he got them to finish in a decent position in the table. But Mick McCarthy, when he came in over Neil Harris originally, you know, he actually came in and looked like that he really got some optimism back with Cardiff. They looked like they had a safe pair of hands. And they went through a run of 8 consecutive defeats. That's actually the longest losing streak out of any team in the Championship, even a longer losing streak than Barnsley, and they got relegated with 30 points. So Mick McCarthy definitely didn't cover himself in too much glory there. Steve Morrison coming in to replace him. I think considering what he had to do, you know, Cardiff at that time were really on the cusp of getting dropped into the bottom 3. And he's got them to finish relatively comfortably. I wouldn't say he's done a poor job, but I'd say he just about scrapes into the good tier. He probably would be just like right at the lower end of the good tier. But considering that the fact that he had some players leave for the likes of Moore and Cardiff still were able to compete within the season, and as I said, they finished relatively comfortable from the relegation pack, really. I think they're a bit fortunate with the fact that the relegation 3 didn't really pick up too many points this year. You know, it wasn't really a competitive bottom 3 whatsoever with all the championship seasons I looked over. But Steve Morrison managed to steady the ship in his own way. And I don't know how I feel about him taking over like for a full job next year. It's going to be a very interesting test to see if he can defy expectations and potentially get his Cardiff side to improve. Now, Shop is going to be another one. He's going to be in the just bad one. He just was an unknown manager, and he was just the wrong choice from the get-go. Only 1 win in charge, was that a 1-0 win over Coventry, and even with that win, you know, they were very fortunate to get it. Collins and Goal had to save a late penalty in the last minute, really, and had that penalty been scored, then Marcus Shop, with the games that he had in charge, would actually not have won a game whatsoever. So Shop has been he's been someone where I think the squad was going to feel quite depleted, a bit let down, you know, mentally in terms of getting into the top 6, reaching the highs of the top 6. And I think they've been a bit of the victim of their own downfall, Barnsley, with their own success. So I don't think they managed expectations whatsoever, and ultimately they just really continue to drop down the pack. So unfortunately, that's a bit disappointing that far. And Espaghi, I wouldn't say just bad, maybe the poor tier, because at least with Espaghi, he got a decent bit of form at one stage of the season, you know, in around March time. Barnsley were looking all right with their form. Their home form was improving there. They got a good home point against Fulham, and actually were leading for most of that game. If it wasn't for Harry Wilson's stunner, they actually would have picked up all 3 points in that game. But overall, it still just wasn't enough. He definitely didn't get enough momentum in this Barnsley side for be a team chasing for survival. They ultimately were rooted down to the table, 24th place and 30 points. It's a big improvement for what Schock did, but ultimately just nowhere near enough. And he was brought in, obviously, to try and get this team to survive. He's ultimately failed that, and he's no longer Barnsley manager going into League One. I wouldn't say just bad, it wasn't all doom and gloom when he was there, but it definitely was not great, so all good, so it's going to be in the poor tier. Neil Warnock's a really tricky one for me to rank, and I think based on what we've done, I think he's got to be in the poor tier. So when he was sacked, Middlesbrough were in 14th place of the table, and when you consider the squad that they had, it was a squad with a lot of potential, and when you consider when he joined Middlesbrough, replacing the likes of Woodgate when he was in charge at Middlesbrough at that time, when he had that first full season, he got Middlesbrough to finish in the top 10 of the table. This season, it was a little bit more of the same, but other than that, it was really inconsistent, and that lack of consistency, especially with them scoring goals, they had a trouble scoring goals when Neil Warnock was in charge. They got rid of him, and ultimately when Wilder came in, they did improve. They were very close actually to get into the top 6 in the end, and I wouldn't say poor, but I think he definitely does a better job than what Morrison did. When you get a replacement manager, you want to see an improvement, hence why you see Steve Cooper, being in the top tier with the resources he's had and the biggest improvement he had. And Wilder with the resources, I think he has got more talented resources in at his disposal, but he ultimately needed a January transfer window to try and push for things. I do question some of the transfers he made, Connolly from Brighton being one and Balogun being another questionable couple of transfers there. But I think given a full season with the squad that they have, and considering the positive momentum they did have, considering where they were under Warnock and now, I think the future is slightly bright for Middlesbrough. We are going to wait to see if they have potentially broken profit and sustainability rules. But if they have been cleared of that and they could definitely keep all their points that they earned for next season, then it could be potentially a really good season for Middlesbrough next year. Now Jokanovic, I almost forgot, and he was even one of the managers that we had this season, and I think he's just going to be in... Oh, it's so tough, really. I mean, considering the squad he had, it's going to be just bad for me. I know Sheffield United mentally, I think we're going to take a long while to try and get used to, like a brand new season. And I think Jokanovic was kind of a victim of what his own philosophy is, because it's so different for what they were used to under Wilder and Heckingbottom in a way. Going forward at the back there, it was very, very different, and clearly the squad didn't really click with it. There was a couple of decent performances, that 6-2 victory to Peterborough being one, but then the others, the rest, it just wasn't good at all. I still remember that 4-0 defeat they had against West Brom at the Hawthorns, and it was demoralising, really. 2 relegated teams for the Premier League, and it's crazy to think that the team that beat the other team 4-0 actually finished below them in the second half of the season. So it just goes to show how quickly things can change in the season when you get a right manager, and I think Heckingbottom has done a terrific job. I am honestly really surprised. I was really surprised that he's actually done a terrific job with his Sheffield United side. I think a lot of us were very sceptical and actually mocking the fact that he was the manager at that time. We remember what he was like with Leeds. He wasn't particularly great there. Hibernian, he had spells, but he wasn't particularly great. And with Sheffield United, even in the Premier League, I know he picked up more wins, but Sheffield United fell what Wilder did. But all those wins actually came at a time when Sheffield United were already down and out, and didn't really have a lot to play for, unfortunately. This time, I think what he did really well, I think he took the pressure off them. I think when the standards started to get back up, I think definitely things got a bit trickier for him. He definitely had a big injury list to deal with as well. So he coped quite well, all circumstances given. And I honestly think he was actually the best choice that he could have gone for, based on the finish that Sheffield United got. When you look at the position they were bottom half, even below 15th place when Jokanovic was sacked. And the fact he's got them to raise above 10 places to get, into the top 6 by the end of the season, you've got to say he's done a terrific job. He's done exactly what he was designed to do. And I think if he stays on, they'll definitely have a good season next year, Sheffield United. Frankie McAvoy, for me, 18th place when Preston, were when he got sacked there. Football was not great. It's between poor and just bad, I've got to say. maybe the upper end of just bad, I think. I think it's a really, really small margin between just bad and poor, I've got to say. But in that time when he was sacked from Preston, they were really in downfall. There was a positive that Reece Jacobson was improving his performances, but other than that, really, it was still the same old Preston, really, and it was even worse off of where they were with Alex Neil. I know they sacked Alex Neil when they were in the bottom half, in the Championship as well. But this was 18th place, and only within a matter of points that they could have potentially been in the bottom three. And some content creators predicted that Preston could be in the bottom three. And you've got to say, when McAvoy was gone and the football philosophy changed with Rhinelo going in, they definitely looked much better. And I've got to say, I think he's done a good job. I think not as good as Wilder with Middlesbrough, but I think he's done a lot better than what Steve Morison has done. I think definitely the turnaround between Cardiff and Preston, I think it's definitely a much better and more notable turnaround with Preston North End. And I've got to say, I think when you give him a full season of transfers, obviously he's working with not many of his players. I think we've had that problem a couple of times with some patchy performances, some great performances, some performances not that great. There's already been a couple of players let go, Sinclair and Barkhazen being two, that have already left Preston. They could expect to see a couple more very, very soon as well. So I'll be very, very interested to see what approach and what sort of players Rhinelo's going to go for. I definitely think Rhinelo has got the potential. I definitely saw more good from his managerial reign than McAvoy. So it was easy for me to put Rhinelo in the good tier. Now, Grant McCann's weird because he's had two managerial stints, and ultimately you would argue that what you've got is in just bad. To get sacked and then to go to your next club and get relegated. But for me, I personally would say it's so tricky, but I am actually going to go for the lower end of good from Steve Morison there. So the reason is that when he was with Hull, he got them to actually finish pretty comfortably out of the relegation zone. At the start, it was quite scary, and I was questioning that Grant McCann was out of his depth again. But then he did manage to get his team together, managed to get them to get a good run of form, and that's Hull City, that is. When the new ownership came in, they ultimately didn't see Grant McCann as a long-term future, so they got rid of him. So I think the circumstances weren't quite McCann's fault there. It was just Hull wanting to change direction. He goes to Peterborough, and I've got to say, he gave Peterborough one hell of a chance, considering where they were when they sacked Darren Ferguson there. So I do think McCann has improved things with Peterborough, and I actually think, whilst it wasn't enough, they were only 4 points behind Reading in the end, and had he started earlier, I do think that he would have given Peterborough a fighting chance. So, bit of a shame, and I think just poor from the boards, from both clubs really. Well, for one, to treat McCann the way that Hull did, and then Peterborough just to be too slow in trying to get McCann in potentially. So I think the boards are really to blame for his position. So that's why I've given him the benefit of the doubt, and he's gone to a good tier. Darren Ferguson, so the manager that he replaced, he's going to go just bad. I mean, I called it from the start. I just didn't think that he was a championship-worthy manager. Tactically was poor. Team was poor. Transfers were decent-ish, but still wasn't really finding a lot of inspiration, especially in the new year. It was very, very poor. They had a period that I don't think he only had one win between October and February, and that was outrageous that a team, is able to pull that poor of a form, in that substantial period of time as well. So Ferguson ultimately gets what he deserves, unfortunately, and he's in the just bad category. Now, Shorter Aldervaze now, I think good. Considering what he's done, it's difficult to grade him because he's not really had too much time with Hull. I definitely think it's going to be a lot easier to judge him when he's going to have a full season with Hull. Ultimately, they didn't really change in the table at all, when he came in. I mean, Hull were 19th when they sacked Grant McCann, and then 19th still when Aldervaze was in. So ultimately, he didn't do anything that was going to push Hull up. They just wanted to get someone in just so they can see someone for a long-term future there. Valerian Ismail, oh dear me. So he got sacked when West Brom were 5th place, but I've got to say, even when they were 5th place, it did look like this team was starting to really lose their nerve. So for that, I'm going to put him in the upper end of the poor tier. Nearly good, but I can't give him a good managerial job after what he's just done for West Brom there. I would say Steve Bruce has done worse off. I think Steve Bruce has done worse off, hence why I think he's even going to be in the just bad for me. So, but to be honest, with Ishmael, it was going to be a little bit interesting. You know, the expectations were very, very high for West Brom. They wanted the top 6 place. I think the disappointment was their long unbeaten run of 10 games at the start of the season, and then ultimately the wheels fell off. And then when it got to December, near the new year, they really, really had a poor run of form, and it wasn't really due to many injuries, really. The team was just lacking confidence going forward. They were leaking a load of goals. Steve Bruce goes in and he even drops the team lower down by 5 places. So the fact they even got West Brom to finish mid-table, Steve Bruce, I mean, that's unacceptable. That's why he's going to be in the just bad. Ishmael, I'm going to put him in poor because personally, if I saw him, you know, staying in as West Brom manager, I still think that they would have been closer to top 6, but I think West Brom would not have got it based on their poor form. Now, Velkyo Panovich, for me, he's going to be in the just bad. I mean, I think I'm being a bit harsh on a load of these managers here, but unfortunately with Panovich, a lot of it was due to the problems that Reading had. So a lot of the time his hands have been tied with that. But some of the football that they were playing was really, really poor. They were really relying on the likes of Mate, Zhao when he was fit, and Swift at the start of the season where he had his unbelievable form. And ultimately, you know, they found themselves in a really dodgy position. It was definitely a big contrast that Panovich had from the year before to now, and ultimately it just didn't look like he had any sort of control and didn't really look like he had any confidence to get Reading out of it. You know, they were within touching distance of falling into the bottom 3 when Panovich did leave. Now Ince comes in and ultimately does what he does. He got Reading to survive. I personally think though he's done a good job to get Reading to survive, but he's very, very lucky not to be in the poor tier. He's very lucky for me because his points per game is quite similar to Panovich's. I think he slightly improves it. And ultimately, he's good for the benefit of doubt that he's kept Reading up, because Reading were a sinking ship. And ultimately, we were looking at the likes of Derby and one stage Barnsley, and even Peterborough with McCann going in, looking like they could overtake Reading at some stage. But Ince came in and got some really good results, got a 1-1 draw against Bournemouth, and then we remember the 4-4 draw against Swansea, that 3-goal comeback, which is absolutely unbelievable. So he picked up some really, really good points as Reading manager, hence why they've awarded him the full-time job for next year. I personally don't think it's a positive appointment if they really wanted to try and move forward up the table. So, I mean, I don't know what to say about it. But, you know, we've seen a lot of these managers prove me wrong a lot of the time, and that potentially Ince could be one for next season. Let's talk about a good manager now. This bottom 3 tiers are getting a bit congested. Nathan Jones is going straight to the manager of the season category. I think a lot of people will feel quite split with this. This is a team that lost 5-0 to Birmingham, 7-0 to Fulham, but bear in mind the budget. It barely squeaks over £2 million. There's an unbelievable stat that, honestly, that in the top 6 alone, in fact, even 5th place Sheffield United, their budget is 50 times more than what Luton's was. The fact that Nathan Jones has got that best out of his players that much to even compete with the teams that on paper, you know, budget-wise would trounce Luton, it's unbelievable. I mean, I predicted them to finish in 9th place and said they were dark horses, but ultimately I really bottled it because I definitely had good ideas that Nathan Jones is just a quality manager and he would get his team to the top 6. And ultimately, that is exactly what he did. And you've got to give Nathan Jones and Luton Town so much credit there. That, you know, he's done an incredible job. And honestly, I think if he stays on, I can only see Luton Town improving from here. Now, Michael O'Neill is a really tough one too. I'm going to personally put it in the poor category. Personally, for me, with that squad for Stoke, to finish in 14th place, the same place as last year, is just not good enough. And I do feel quite sorry for him. You know, obviously, near the end of the season, he had to go away. You know, he had surgery and stuff. But also his injuries as well didn't help as well. Nick Powell and Sutar going in quick succession was a big blow as well. But we've seen in the past, and some teams this season, manage injuries well. I've not even just mentioned Luton just now. You know, Luton have had a big injury list and they still were actually able to continue their momentum into the top 6. And that's what Sheffield United did as well. So it can be done with the right approach. And I just think tactically, Michael O'Neill can get it right, but then he can also get it wrong. And the first half of the season, they were quite good. And then, as I said, with injuries and other circumstances, they just ultimately just could not find that same rhythm as they did at the start of the season. And I do think the standards are just falling for me for Stoke City right now. On paper, Stoke really should be pushing for top 6. And since getting relegated from the Premier League, they've not even done that. And that is a real disappointment for me. I'd be really upset if I was a Stoke fan right now. Scott Parker, I'm going to put him in the higher end of good, I think. I personally would say that he was exposed a bit for the fact that he did get this Bournemouth side to do quite well. I've got to say, first half of the season, I think he was up there for the top 2 managers personally. But I think at the second half of the season, where I do think his bottle was tested quite a fair bit. I think tactically he was definitely very stretched as well. I think he overthought a couple of things. Nottingham Forest were really pushing Bournemouth the whole way, and Bournemouth led them by 14 points by one stage, which is incredible that Forest have closed that much of a gap considering the amount of games you have, the amount of times teams are very inconsistent as well. And you've got to say, Bournemouth, I felt were a little bit fortunate. It was ultimately make or break in that game. And I think definitely the halftime team talk that he did for this Bournemouth side, I think definitely gave me thinking, okay, he can have some good parts about his management here. But I personally think going forward, I don't know if he's going to be the right choice for the Premier League. He's tried the Premier League before. He's never got a team to survive. He's only been with Fulham, caretaker and also full-time manager in 2 separate seasons and ultimately relegated both times with Fulham. So I definitely feel, even if they do want to give Scott Parker some time in the Premier League, I think they definitely could be very mindful that they should try and look for someone near if Scott Parker doesn't get any results there. But ultimately, he did what he wanted to do and what he expected to do with the amount of money spent that Bournemouth made and, to get them promoted. I think he's done exactly what he needed to do, but I tell you what, he very, very nearly didn't deliver on his principles. Hence why he's in the good tier, but not in the terrific tier. Lee Bowyer, it's been a pretty bad season, I gotta say. 20th place, Birmingham, and I obviously gotta say, take the points deductions out of it, they would have been really pushed, in the final couple of days. They would have been right in a relegation battle, and if results were as they were without the points deductions, then Birmingham would have scraped survival by goal difference. And the squad that they had is definitely more capable of a 21st place squad, especially with the January loan signings of Onel Hernandez and Junior Bacuna. Both of them, by themselves, individually, looked really, really good, but the team just didn't really look united, and that's a real concern for me going forward into the new season. I think the circumstances are very difficult for Birmingham at the moment, so I don't think it's particularly Lee Bowyer's fault there, but I just definitely think there's a definite step down to where Lee Bowyer was with Birmingham last year, which I think is a bit of a shame. Neil Critchley, who's no longer Blackpool manager, he's got to be in a terrific tier. I mean, with the resources he's had, he's done unbelievable work there. And in fact, I'm going to put him just above Heckingbottom, actually. Maybe a bit surprising for me to say that, but considering Blackpool were a team that, likewise with Luton, their budget barely squeaks, above the 2 million mark. And with the players that they got in to perform as well as they did, Hamilton, the likes of Medine, Lavery, Josh Bowler, all those players did really, really well and played their part for what has been, I think, a really positive season for Blackpoolian. They did have a couple of patchy moments, especially in the beginning part of the season, and at one stage near the end of the season where they were on the beach, they didn't really try and win any more points. They ended on 60 points, which is definitely fantastic points return for Blackpool. Could have even been a little bit better, hence why I've not put him in manager of the season category, but 16th place and 60 points is a decent standard to actually start off from when you're a recently promoted team from League One. A lot of the times, a lot of people do predict recently promoted teams to go straight back down, and Blackpool definitely didn't really look like a team that were going straight back down, from September onwards. So I've got to say, fair play to Critchley there. Nigel Pearson now, I'm going to put him in maybe the upper end of poor, maybe. I think just below Ishmael, maybe. I mean, at this moment of time, Bristol City's a really difficult team to put my foot on, really, to be honest, because goal scoring wise, they are fantastic. I think with the amount of goals that they scored, you'd be surprised that they finished this low down in the table in 17th place. The problem is that they just ultimately concede too many chances and just ultimately just don't have a solid defence, and I don't think their midfield ultimately dominates games either. So they've got one really good element. If I would say two, if we're including Daniel Bentley in goal, because I think he's had another great season with Bristol City. If they can get the defensive midfield right, Bristol City can be a really exciting team next year, and they've already made signings in the defensive position, so that's exciting news for Bristol City fans. But whether Nigel Pearson is going to be the right manager to take them forward, I don't know. I'm 50-50 on Nigel Pearson, to be honest. If he's going to be the right manager, going to be taking Bristol City potentially an improvement for next year. So, Bristol City fans, if you're watching this video, let me know if your thoughts on Nigel Pearson. I'd be very interested to know. Mark Robbins, he's got to go to the terrific tier, I think, with Critchley and Heckingbottom there. Coventry have had a fantastic season, great improvement, and not only is it our highest points tally in over 15 years, I believe, in the Championship, which is incredible. It's their highest placing, actually, for over 10 years as well. They have finished in higher places before in the Championship, and they definitely really could have actually finished in the top 10 had they not lost that consistency near the end of the season. I mean, they had a terrific home form at the beginning of the season, and then in the second half of the season, they had a terrific away form. So ultimately, they just couldn't find the right balance of consistent home and away form. So ultimately, I think what they need is a deeper squad, because they definitely had some players that, when they were injured, and that, the attacking players have just not been clinical either. So depth and more clinical attackers, then I think Coventry will be soaring up the table. Mark Robbins has signed a deal recently, so I think that's a brilliant bit of news for Coventry. They remind me a lot of Luton, really, to be fair. Just improving every season and just looking like they're going to have a positive momentum going forward. So I'm really excited for Coventry next year. Tony Mowbray, I think for me, he's going to be in the good tier. And I think it's really difficult to summarise his season, because I personally think it's been an average one, really. But I think not poor enough to be a poor season, because I think 8th place is a brilliant finish for Blackburn. They definitely would have taken 8th place if you offered them that at the start of the season. But I think the circumstances that happened, obviously getting so close, into the top 6, they were right well in it, even in talking about automatics in around December time. But in the turn of the year, it tends to be the same thing with Tony Mowbray's sides, but they lose their form and momentum, and I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's January transfers trying to implement them in, or I don't know if it's just the turnover, I don't know if it may be the Christmas break, I don't even know what it is, but something happens in that December to January time, and then the players just never seem to recover. It's almost like a different team. But the great goal scoring of Diaz, and then we've seen great performances in Dolan, Rothwell, Lenningham at the back, Kaminsky in goal. Great performances, and I do think Mowbray has done quite well, and has actually, I think, done decently well to get this Blackburn team into 8th place. I'm just going to be very, very interested to see who they replace him. Duncan Ferguson is currently the favourite at the moment, for what I know. The former assistant head manager of Everton, of course, which I've got to say, it will be very interesting to see him in the Championship. He's got a fantastic record against Chelsea, I'll tell you guys that. Russell Martin, I think he's done pretty well. I think it's a good season, all things considered. I think the change of transition was always going to be very, very tricky. I think Cooper has definitely made Swansea a really, really good team to watch. Martin ultimately had to go in, try and fill a void of them losing a load of players, because ultimately they didn't get promoted via the playoffs. Rodon, Ayew being players that they lost over the years. And Martin had to go in, try and get some new players in for the likes of Pirro, and that was a very inspired signing at the end. So I definitely think Pirro and Martin, if they both stay, I think Swansea will improve, and I think their form in 2022 is rather good as well. I think they're actually in the top half of the table when it comes to form in 2022. They didn't finish in the top half of the table because they had a pretty poor first half of the season, but ultimately I think going forward, I do think Swansea are going in the right direction, and I think give them time, I think eventually we'll see them improve. QPR with Mark Warburton. This is so tough for me. I think it's going to be poor. I think it has to be poor for Warburton, I've got to say. I was thinking good, but in the end, I have decided it's going to be in the poor one for me. And reason being is that the squad that they had the momentum, they had the right players to even get them into that top 6. And the fact that they were in that momentum, in that top 6, I do think it's a little bit unfortunate, a bit similar to the likes of O'Neill, that circumstances definitely gone away of that. We had the Africa Cup of Nations where Cher and Dieng left, and ultimately the goalkeeping situation was just manic for the defence. They defensively they were really, really poor with that. And then going forward as well, they were not scoring as many goals. Willock was relied upon to fill in for Chair. Then he got injured, so they were lacking a creative player when both weren't available. Warburton will be moved on, and Michael Beale will take over for next season. I already gave my thoughts on Michael Beale on my transfer show on the Friday, so make sure you do check it out if you've not seen it. Gary Rowett, I think he's done a good job. Maybe even a terrific job. Nah, I'm gonna say a good job. Maybe. I don't know. It's between terrific and good. You know what? There's a lack of managers in the terrific tier. I'm going to bring Gary Rowett there. I think Mill will be in another team with a low budget. I think there was potentially a chance that he could have pushed them into that top 6, but I definitely think expectations-wise, they definitely didn't have as many expectations to get up there. The likes for what Blackburn did at the start of the season, and then you're looking at the other teams in the good tier as well. Middlesbrough having much higher expectations as well. They went very, very close actually in their promotion season, didn't they? And since then, they've not really had any season where they've gone really close since, and I think this is probably the closest they've been since when they finished 7th place with their third season back in the Championship with Neil Harris in charge. So I've got to say, Gary Rowett, I think he's done a steady job. I think he's done exactly what he needed to do there. I think had they improved consistency away from home and they matched it with their home form, then they definitely would have got top 6, because I think they actually had the 3rd best home form in the league. So it was very, very tough to get anything out from the Den. So I think Millwall, if they carry that home form next year and then they improve their away form, then don't be surprised to see Millwall in the top 6, that's all I'm going to say. To our final 3 managers now, Wayne Rooney. Now this one's going to definitely divide opinion, but for me, I think he's done a good job. I think he's done a really good job, all things considered. I definitely think for the fact that there was a moment that I think Derby could have survived, and I think definitely more experience in Wayne Rooney's management in trying to get points away from them. But similar to Gary Rowett, I think had they really attacked and really, really gone for their away games, I think both of them would have been in much better positions. Mill being in the top 6 and Derby potentially surviving based on the little amount of points that Reading picked up in the end. But I think overall, with the amount that went against him, the off-the-field stuff he dealt with very well, the youth he's introduced in that Derby squad, it's definitely positive on the pitch, but ultimately just fell a little bit short actually. The fact that they didn't actually get Derby to finish rock bottom, I think you've got to give Wayne Rooney a load of plaudits there. Maybe I'm a bit harsh not putting him in terrific, but I am reminding you guys that Derby did have a chance at one stage to get out of the bottom 3, and ultimately, they just couldn't really compete into that, unfortunately. So, they're going to fall just below that there. Carlos Corberán, manager of the season, easy peasy. I mean, the improvement in Huddersfield is incredible. The signings they got in were positive. They really fit into the squad. And Corberán, I think, has been a talented coach. I think we've all known that. But I think the amount he's changed in terms of being sometimes pragmatic, attacking, the formations he's tweaked as well, and how organised he's got these players as well. The players from lower leagues and how he's improved them as well. Nick Coles and the likes of Sorba Thomas, lower league players to be 2 of the best players in the Championship this season. He's definitely improved players, but he's definitely really got the best that he could have done with his Huddersfield squad. So I've got to say he's done really well with that. Marco Silva, finally, I think he's done, I say, a terrific job. I think it's difficult with Fulham, really, because I definitely think they've been quite a bit spoilt with the amount of, the amount of money they got, the talent players they got, and the depth that they got as well. But ultimately, Fulham, I definitely think this team was capable of a lot more, and had they broken those records, then I think Marco Silva would have been up there. There was one stage where they looked like they can overtake the points record, and they could overtake the goals record, and ultimately they didn't actually beat any records in terms of goals and the points. There were individual records for Mitrovic, so he's done really, really well with that front there. But I definitely think because they've fallen short of some incredible records, I'm going to put them in terrific, but still a really good season. I'll be very interested to see how they do in the Premier League with Marco Silva. So guys, that's me ranking all the Championship managers this year. If there's any you agree on, let me know in the comments down below. Was I too harsh? Was I too generous on some managers? Please let me know of all of that in the comments down below, and let me know of your opinions as well. But guys, I'll wrap it up. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like the video, please do give the video a like. It does tremendously help the channel. Please do hit that subscribe button if you've not done so. It does really help the growth of this channel. And please share this channel to as many people as you can. All of that helps too. That'll wrap it up, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching, guys. The legendary Sonia in this video. As always, I'll see you guys soon. Take care, everyone.